access to it afterwards. So I'll also introduce myself as well and then what we do at Kehillah Studios before we introduce our speak panelists for today and also begin with the questions. And also we'll leave some minutes at the end for anyone who also has questions for the panelists before we round up the session with like a final question for each panelist before we round up the session. So I would be sharing my screen as well to um, give information as well. So today's topic we'll be discussing about is the future of African storytelling and the creative industry in
Forwarding.
Africa. And we'll have it's pretty much a discussion on like how African creators are shaping the continent's identity, innovation, and cultural power through storytelling. So that's what we'll be discussing today. And our questions for today will also revolve around then this particular topic as well as, but first of all, starting with obviously um, our individual journeys into each areas, fields where each speakers are in as well. So a bit about myself. My name is Victoria, and also into different kind of like creative fields and not just one particular one. So my interests are 3D animation and also environmental modeling because I also studied animation at university and also have a master's degree in it as well. So I kind of like ventured into more of 3D stuff because that's pretty much my main interest. And I also do other creative work like video editing, graphic design, and also content creation. So I'm pretty much like a freelancer in most of those fields as well. So I've created many different kind of projects, individual projects and also collaborative projects around each of those fields. So I'm also an entrepreneur as well. I also own a clothing line where I also print like t-shirts on demand. And also earlier this year, I started Kehillah Studios, which is like a growing community of African creatives, which is established for the purpose of networking with other creatives around the world. Obviously, starting with Manchester, where I am, before reaching out to other countries as well, like especially Nigeria. So that's pretty much what I do and what I hope to continue building as well throughout my creative journey. I also started learning animation from 2017 when I wanted to get into college after high school. So that's when I kind of like started learning about animation and also studying animation university and also creating my own animation stories, especially stories that promote African culture and African storytelling. And I already went over this like in the first session, but especially for people who are just joining this session, I haven't joined our previous festival sessions. I'll still go over what we do as Studios, which is a community established to promote African storytelling through animation, film, and art and design. Because Africa as a continent full of talent, rich in diverse cultures and traditions, and own unique stories that deserve global recognition. So, animation, film, and arts, obviously the main three mediums that we want to promote African storytelling, and also build a community of creatives that can also um, help this kind of idea to promote African stories through the different mediums and fields that they want to venture into. And this is based on our vision, which is to empower African creatives who will bring African stories to a global stage through animation, film, and design, both home and abroad. So we also plan to provide training programs such as workshops, seminars, and even festivals like this to empower African creatives around the world, whether they're in Africa or in Europe. And also the purpose of this is to establish a platform where opportunities for Black creators around the world is shared, where they gain more knowledge about the creative industry and where we can raise more Africans having interest in the creative industry. So that is what Creator Studios is about in a nutshell, and what we hope to do as well. We hope to promote the main agenda is to promote African storytelling through animation as the main medium, as well as different other mediums like film and art and design. So we'll introduce our speaker and panelists for today, and the first person is Madam Esther, who is CEO of CEO of Radioxity Media. Um,
Mediocrity. Yes.
yes, and she's a writer, cinematographer, editor, and stop motion animator for over 15 years. Her film projects have received multiple filmmaking awards through different festivals that are listed in the slide. I really want to go through everything. And so our project Prepare to Die was selected at the Durban Film Mart 2022, Cape Town International Animation Festival 2022, Digital Labs Africa 2022, and Market Stop Motion Forum and MIP TV Producers to Watch 2023. She looks forward to seeing more inspiring African stories through stop motion animation. So that is Madam Esther. So the next person we have on our panel is Mr. Ferdy, who is a creative entrepreneur focused on animation, games, and blockchain ecosystem. He leads one of Africa's most promising innovation storytelling company called um, Magic Carpet Studios that specialize in developing authentic African stories. The studio is one of the leading animation games development and metaverse studios in Africa, playing a significant role in the development of the animation industry on the continent. And last but not least is Mr. Richard. Um, he's not currently here at the moment, but we're hoping he joins later on soon. But I'll introduce him anyway. So he's the president of Orange VFX Studios, which is a broadcasting company that was founded in 2018. He created Ovi and Owali, Nigeria's first viral 3D character back in 2033, which are currently being used for DSTV campaigns in parts of Africa. He leads Nigeria in creating the animation and visual effects continent to entertain and help African organizations and businesses stand out in a competitive marketplace. And he helps mentor, inspire, and support the next generation of the African digital content creators, providing empowerment they need to succeed in the VFX and animation industry. So those are our three panels for today. And before we start as well, can everyone turn off their mics so we don't have extra voices like playing over me if everyone can keep their mics off. So for the first segment of the session, we'll be talk about like personal journeys of each panelist. So I'll kind of like ask a question that's pretty much directed to all of you and also then tailored follow-up questions for individual panelists as well. So we'll start by this question. And the first question is, so, like, what inspired your journey into storytelling and the creative industry, and how has your background influenced your creative path? And we'll start with Madam Esther, please. If you can also talk us through that, like what inspired your journey into storytelling and how has your background also influenced your creative path?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share thoughts and ideas and our story, elements of our story and journey. It's something that's always very exciting to do. And um, of course, um, what would have inspired, us to tell stories. It's been well, I grew up pretty shy. I think I'm still shy. So so I always but I had lots of ideas, things I wanted to share and I'd like people to see. And I found, storytelling in making films, being able to tell, thoughts that I had, things I was passionate about, things that I connected with, things I did not like. I found the filmmaking medium, a medium that not just told people around me, but way beyond, that kind of thing. So way back, I started out making documentaries. Documentaries just captured things that were happening around. And yes, my thoughts and people's thoughts about it and all of that. So I made quite a bit of documentaries in the early years, say like 10 years ago. 20 years ago. Yes, those were times that, I did documentaries. I started by also working 3D animation because I found that I didn't need to deal with a lot of people to make 3D animated content. So, and 3D animation was quite popular at, well, not popular, but at least it was accessible. It was something that we could learn at that time. I didn't know what stop motion was. I didn't even know it existed, So I did 3D animation for about 8 years. I told a couple of stories doing 3D animation. I would, I was like a generalist, so I would model, I would rig, create sets, that's model the sets and make renders and all of that, and then animate. So I did sequences, I did adverts and all of that, 3D. And this was way back. This is say 2008. 2008, 2009, thereabouts, up to 2000 and say 11, And so I thought that, 3D animation was what I was going to do. I enjoyed doing documentaries on the side because obviously I needed to make money. I wasn't able to make money from animation at that time. So but from documentaries I made for lots of corporate organizations. I did for governments, and stuff like that. So it worked, for me. But when I got married in 2011, and then had my first child in 2013. And that was where things got complicated, in the sense that I couldn't cope with 3D animation. It was getting a bit too well. First, when I was pregnant, I couldn't. It was getting really tough, so I really had to put my laptop aside, to just make sure that I could cope and all of that. And so I stopped. I was like, okay, I would pause when I have the child. I would have more time, but it was worse. I became, I had a parent. I became a parent, and had to spend more time. And so, essentially, I took like 5 year break. Because after her, I had my son, so it was really a stretch. But in between, now this was the interesting part. In between, I would buy toys for them, and I would pose the toys and come up with some very nice poses, and then I would take the pictures because I didn't want to lose the pose and take. So I would have new poses, take pictures, do like the Spider-Man pose, all sorts of poses, and then start putting them into sequences because they looked like really fun. And so this was like 12 years ago anyway. So it was just taking pictures, sequences. Note, I still did not know what stop motion was. I didn't know. I'm Nigerian, I didn't have access to knowing that there was something called stop motion around the world. But I took pictures, did sequences. I started making more and more sequences because it looked like something I could easily do and I enjoyed doing. And so it didn't take, I think it took about probably 3 years in that I once saw on YouTube, I think like Kuba and Two Strings, and I saw, whoa, I was like, oh, okay, this looks like stop motion, and all of that. So that was when I began to understand that it was stop motion animation that I was attempting to do. And then, so then I could have some direction, I could learn and all of that. So, but then this is a long time ago, it's been a journey ever since then. But that was essentially how I got into storytelling through stop motion animation because storytelling is one, being able to share what your thoughts are and your ideas and what your expectation of the world could be. But then storytelling through stop motion, it didn't come, it wasn't something I planned, in any way. It wasn't something I even knew existed. It was just something that somehow, I think I would always say that stop motion found me, in that sense, because it's when the moment I figured out what it was, it's been all the way, it has, in spite of all the challenges, the fact that it looked environmentally impossible to do stop motion, somehow we've been able to sort of like click, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's essentially what I believe the question was.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much as well.
yeah,
With all the stuff that you also do, like you're involved with cinematography as well and other
yeah,
fields as well. So
yeah.
I wanted to ask if which of these kind of like first sparked your passion for like storytelling, which was kind of like the era you kind of really first went into to like
Yes.
storytelling as well.
Okay. Well, I love cameras. I've always loved cameras. I have a background in engineering, so naturally, I'm very attracted to devices. And so being able to capture, because like when I was in uni, I almost got into trouble with my camera because I always had a camera on my neck, trying to film things and just capture things, take pictures and stuff like that. There was a time that in school that there was a situation and they were like, there was a camera person, there was a cameraman there. What saved me, because they expelled quite a number of the folks that were involved in that riot. I just came to cover what was going on, but then yes, but then it became an issue. There was a cameraman, there was someone that recorded, but then it was me, so it wasn't a guy. And so it wasn't able to figure out who it was. But then I've always loved cameras. I've always liked to capture, things that around me, and all of that. So yeah, it's been years, it's been many years with cinematography. I I only do right now, I only do cinematography for stop motion animation. I'm more or less like 100% focused right now on stop motion. So but then I've had very broad sort of like film and documentary and all of and animation and all of that in the past, But after COVID, I recognized the fact that, telling if you want to get something done, the element of focus is very critical, for you to be able to succeed at it. If you are too spread, and you have so many things that you're doing, the likelihood of succeeding effectively at all of them, it's relatively low. So it's for me, I had to make that choice and say, see, what do I feel what do I connect with the most? And I saw that stop motion had it all for me. It had the technical. I'm quite technical, so it had the technical dexterity that, and then the artistic kind of creativity. It does have that, and so it's sort of, and then of course my filmmaking experience, my experience with 3D animation. Everything just folds into stop motion. Because if I probably haven't done 3D animation, I would not know about modeling sets, modeling characters, and being able to create assets for your film. So by the time I was getting into stop motion, I was very aware. I was very aware of how to create all the assets. I had already enough experience with film. I'd done film for a while, so doing the cinematography for it, setting things up, lights, and all of that stuff. It was just really like straightforward. Obviously there were new things to learn because I was dealing with miniatures, but beyond that, my previous experience, in various parts of film was very helpful, but at this point, it was very necessary for me to focus.
Mm. Thank you very much. I also learned a bit of stop motion as well at some point while in university, but like, I said like this is not for me. So I went kind of into 3D animation because like for me stop motion is kind of like time consuming and I don't have that kind of patience for those kind of stuff. So I kind of went into 3D because it's kind of like more of my interest and kind of like I just went like sort of loved 3D animation for some reason. I didn't have like a particular reason why I just loved it. So, but like I hated stop motion as well. So it's kind of like it's interesting to see someone that likes stop motion, kind of interested in that sort of area to tell like stories and stuff like that. So it's interesting journey as well. So we go to Mr. Ferdy as well. We want to know about your creative journey. Like what inspired your journey into storytelling and the creative industry, and how has your background influenced your creative path?
Hmm. So for me, my journey to the creative industry began from my childhood. My mom was a teacher, so what that meant for us was that we were forced to read. I remember growing up, and we have all these novels, a lot of it from African writers across the continent. We have from people like Awekwama from Ghana, or Gugu Wationgo, or Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka. So I would pick them, and I think I started reading. And before I started understanding what they were saying, right? So I fell in love with literature. I fell in love with storytelling. And actually, it's very funny, but even as a kid, I attempted writing a couple of novels. It was only this year that I returned to trying to finish what could be my first novel. So I'm a storyteller at heart. But again, my grandmom lived with us as well. And my grandmom would eventually organize like Tales by Moonlight. She would gather us around, we would sit on the mat, and she would tell us stories about African culture. So I had all these ideas. Um, but I would eventually be introduced to TV, and I would always be just intrigued by motion. The idea that cartoon didn't, animation or cartoon, they were not real things, but they were alive. And that was very intriguing for me. It felt like an amazing opportunity to allow your imagination to thrive. But I remember one of the movies that made a significant impact in my life. It was Lion King. Watching Lion King was
Okay.
very spiritual for me, right? And I think that it was spiritual because one of the things I felt, I kind of like the songs, the story, that it was African, everything was speaking to me because up until then, I mean, I would watch a lot of things, but they were not really things I could say, oh, that's actually Swahili. That's something close to home. And that made me believe in the possibility that we can do this. Fast forward to my career, I actually started by working in an ad agency. And I remember working for an advertising agency. And my boss would later tell me that, do you know you're actually a good copywriter? And he wanted me to help out with scripts. So I started to do a lot of script for advertising content, and I attended a script for a short film, and that was how scripting started for me. Um, and then eventually Magic Carpet came. When I started, I worked for an oil and gas for a bit as a brand communication. So I wasn't really doing anything really core oil, but I was helping them tell the story of what they were creating or producing. I would also now leave oil and gas, and I started my first company called Imaginarium. Again, it was about imagination, and we were a creative technology company. I worked with big companies like MTN. We made quite a bit of money. It was a good experience. But after a while, there was a series of policies that came into the space by Buhari, and it started to cripple that space. But I created Magic Carpet under the agency. And when I created Magic Carpet, the question was, how can we create new ways of telling stories? Animation was obviously my natural flow. And I would eventually get my first co-founder, who is actually very technical. Chekube. Chekube was actually an artist. I would eventually convince him that animation is possible. I didn't have the time to learn, but I had stories to tell. And I felt he would make a great director because he had very sophisticated art. And that's how he also now went to learn. And the Magic Carpet started. We were creating a couple of shorts, and people were always loving what we're doing. And of course, we decided that we wanted to do a feature film. We went in search of the an IP. We asked online, which novel would you like to see being adapted to a film? And people were calling a lot of novels, but this one kept coming back. The Passport of Malam Ilya. And I remember reading it as a child, but I couldn't remember a lot of parts of it. And I thought, okay, guys, you know what? Everybody has been suggesting we should do Passport of Madam Ilya as our first 2D feature film, but I need to go and reread it. And I asked everybody to go and reread it over the weekend. And of course, by we sent someone to the market, they got copies from Under the Bridge in CMS, and we came and distributed it to everybody. Go read. So by Monday, Tuesday, we resumed. But Monday, I ran into our first my first staff. He said, "Fedi, it's Passport of Malam Ilya. That is the book," and we all clicked on it, and it became our first project. At the time we started, we really thought that there were people to hire, and we started to advertise. Okay, if you're interested in working in animation, come over. Everybody that came to work wanted to be trained. I said, "Ah, no, I'm looking for people that have trained. They should come and work." It didn't work out that way. So I realized we couldn't produce this movie if we didn't start a training program. So we launched Magic Lab. And Magic Lab became like a training school. Over the last few years, we've trained over 300 people across different. Last year, we graduated 62 in our academy, and it was the first, like a second diploma class. This year, we're also graduating another 100 next month. So it's quite an interesting journey. I've also now been able to return to my core as a creator. I mean, this year I created one of the projects, Legends of Bulan, which is a series inspired by Pan African mythology. And next year we're going into production for that particular series. This year again we are releasing our first animated sitcom called Meet the Igwes. It's a 13 parts episode on MTN streaming platform. So the journey is already showing reward. But I'm enjoying the fact that I'm coming back to my core as a storyteller. And I think storytelling is actually what we should identify with. So we now added 3D as a studio. We've tried some gaming, but fundamentally, the common denominator is storytelling. I so fundamentally believe that the tools may change, but the heart to tell stories will remain. And that I mean, whether it is VR that will come, or whether we're going to find augmented reality, or whether it's what Esther is doing stop motion, it's all about storytelling and finding the most appealing, most suitable medium to capture that heart of the story. And for many of us at Magic Carpet, I try to encourage them to say, see yourself as a storyteller first, not just an animator. So whatever you're animating, ask yourself, how is this conveying a story? And so it's not just about animating, but it's fundamentally also about expressing and carrying through the vital soul of a story.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to ask on top of that question as well, as an entrepreneur in storytelling, was there any moment that convinced you that creativity and technology could redefine Africa's future?
I think there were, looking at it, I think I always knew that. I actually felt like the greatest civilization Africans could never miss out was the one that would be driven by storytelling. I really think in industrial revolution we couldn't participate on the scale because we didn't really have the tools at the time or even the capacity to participate in it. For a major part of the tech revolution and the digital revolution, we were mostly on the consuming side and not so much around on the creative side. I believe that even looking at the way the American concept, the American ideals, the American dream has largely been a storytelling in action. Americans have used storytelling to create this superimposing imagination of America. I also think that we Africans have to capture the soul of what we want people to think about Africa and convey that by story. There are many more beautiful things in Africa than there are ugly things. But unfortunately, we are stuck in the colonial story. So many of African creators, even to myself, I knew more about the Macpherson Constitution, the Richards Constitution. Everything that we studied was pretty much a 1914 construct. But there are more to Africa than 1914. You have to go all the way back to pre-colonial Africa. You have to go to prehistoric Africa, and you dial back to 1,000 years of royalty. I really think a new generation needs to be educated about the power of what it means to be called an African, and for them to awaken to that power and create from there. Whether they go into industry, they go into fashion, they come in with a sense of identity, not apologizing for who they are or pontificating, but fully showing up in the power and in the full glare of their own essence as Africans. And I really think for me, that is what is driving me, is about awakening the consciousness of the African mind, equipping the African mind to claim our true power, to show up and to really occupy the space because that's who we really are.
Thank you very much. That was interesting story, journey as well. And I've also always seen animation as a field of storytelling and that's just entertainment as well. Um, which is why I also built this kind of community where African storytelling could thrive, especially through the medium of animation as well, and not just a means of entertaining our audiences. And even during our discussion on Monday as well, we talked about why are we trying to showcase this kind of culture? Why are we trying to, showcase this kind of story or whatever we're trying to show through our different fields? And even one of our speakers advised that we should also think about the why we're telling the story as well, which is important to show in medium such as animation as well. So thank you very much to both of you for sharing those stories. So we'll go to the next stage where we'll talk about the state and future of African storytelling. So we'll start from Madam Esther again. So I want to ask, how would you describe the current state of African storytelling? Like, are we in a creative renaissance or are we still on a journey toward full recognition globally? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. So I was saying that right now we are, I think we are we have gone through various stages of growth, of self-awareness. We have we have found to an extent, I wouldn't say in wholesomely, but to an extent, we found our sweet spots. As individuals, we came from points where I think we have come from the point where we're really trying to figure out if we could even be proud of our stories. We have, one of the things I really had to process as a filmmaker was that, the impact of colonialism on our story. Now, when I mean on our story, that means our joint story, because sometimes, when we say what's the African story, it's essentially, it's um, there's a lot of, the impact of colonialism can almost not be taken away from it. But what we feel or what we know to be bad is when we completely lose our identity just because, we have experienced that, because we do have an identity, and it's important that we recognize that. I remember when I started out, with stop motion animation, I also remember that, at that time, I couldn't make puppets. I only had access to already existing toys, puppets, dolls, sorry. And most of them, the good ones, were white. And it was an issue, because I sat back, because I wanted to work, I wanted to unmute, but then I asked myself, wait, all of these things, they're all Caucasian, would that be my story? How do I accurately reflect my story, the stories I want to tell, if the characters are white? When you see folks that do cartoons, or like draw cartoons or comic books, one of the things you quickly see that reflects, because many of them actually learn, from foreign sources and all of that, you notice that even when they make the characters black, you notice that they have Caucasian origin, from their shapes, because there's a way that, apart from, there's a lot of things that are different apart from color. So these are some of the things that, we look at, as storytellers. So I believe that we are at the best, I would put it best as saying that we are at that space where our stories are beginning to rise, beyond just us, but around the world. It's now becoming we no longer have that barrier where it's like, oh, okay, it's their story and their stories are their stories are inferior. I think we're breaking past that, and we're probably getting into that, Renaissance period where, our stories can truly, our stories can cross, beyond us and get across to people around the world. So I think at this time, not to miss any words at all, I think at this time is probably, as an animator now, I will talk from the animation perspective, is, and also as a result of probably what I've also experienced, in the last couple of years, that we are at that, that stage where our stories can truly explode. That's what I would say, in order to sound, I don't want to exaggerate, but that's what I can see. That we are at that explosive state, that state where you have a bomb that's about to explode and it goes ting, 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 and it's really like fast. I think that is that point that we are in. So it's the point where we truly need to key in, we can't, it's not the point where we sit down and just sort of like play around. We really have to, key in globally, and like for us, over the years, we've made films. We're currently working on a 7th stop motion animated film. And, when we started working on it last year, I recognized the fact that we're going to be making one and the same kind of films we'll be making. Yeah, different story, but then same quality and all of that. And because I have gone to quite a number of studios around the world, some of the biggest studios around the world, I've visited, I've spent time with them, and all of that. I recognize the fact that our quality is very far. And this is well, we're this is the same platform we're going to drop our films shoulder to shoulder, and our quality isn't, is still way back. I recognize the fact that we really needed to step back and put that seed in the ground. We need high quality. There's something about water. Water always finds its level. If your quality is good, it will stand. Anyway, it doesn't care. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, Africa, or it's coming from India or somewhere else. It's really just about being able to tell a story, a good story, and as you know, excellence is in the detail. So the story is not just in the script. The story is also in the execution, what the elements, the assets, every time we don't always have to produce our stories and everything will look bad and we say it's African, African, because we're organic, then everything looks rough, whereas the real problem is because we're incapable, so some of those things are things that, we need to resolve so that we can spark well, like it's not an explosion that leads to an implosion because we can't stand, that, but we need to really get prepared for that because yes, we are at a very good time, and that's why that's why it's triggering, of course, your festival and so many other festivals. Say some 5 years ago, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about animation. But now, everywhere there's that general recognition of what we do, and the fact that it's done around this part of the world in Africa. So it's really very exciting times. It's very different from the times when I started out. Very, very different. Things are really moving fast. For the past few months, early this year, I worked at a French studio. I worked on a French feature film for a couple of months, and just being able to learn, some of those processes and bring them back here so that we can up our game. Honestly, because when we do, it's that bomb, when it explodes, we would have been ready for it because it is, right now the attention has been drawn, and it's just a function of folks being able to key into that. Whatever people can not just experiment with stuff, but be ready to execute stuff, get their stories out there. This is the time to do that, to get their stories out there and be part of this the transformation that comes, from African stories. Lion King was huge because it gave, that Africa, the feel of Africa globally, but then we also recognize the fact that our stories cannot be told for us. We need to tell our stories ourselves, and then we need to tell it well. When we tell it well, it goes far, it travels far, and then it can really get to the audiences that we would like to be able to share our side of the story as well. Not only us just seeing other parts of the world, and other parts of the world are unable to experience us, which is something that we're really excited about at this time.
Thank you. I was also going to ask, I think you touched a little bit on this question as well. Just relating to like you kind of like produce work that kind of got into festivals and also like gained global attention. So how did you stay like rooted in the African identity while also appealing to international audiences? Like, or how would you advise like your upcoming African creatives to stay true to the African identity while also trying to appeal to global audiences, kind of like to kind of attract global audiences, also watch, kind of African stories through animation and other creative work.
Yeah. I think it's really important that, creatives stay true to themselves, first of all, as individuals, before you're first an individual, with certain preferences, with certain interests, and yeah. And being true to yourself, helps you to be able to establish what kind of storyteller you would want to be. What are the things that are important to you? Is it social issues? Is it global issues? Whatever, if it's maybe global warming, environmental issues, you know, um, bringing technology, into film, science fiction, all of that. We all have that, so it's understanding yourself as a filmmaker and infusing it with, what our culture, what I experience, and everybody has their experience of Africa. Everybody has different experiences. For example, I grew up in Lagos. I grew up in Ikoyi, so I grew up in part of Lagos that was very urban, and so for many years of my life, I had never experienced what was rural, so I had no idea, what it was like to be in the village and stuff like that. So this was many years. My first experience of my first real village experience was when I went to serve, and I didn't try to influence anything. So I just went, I wanted to go straight to wherever, and obviously they sent me to a very extreme, no lights, no anything, so we had to fetch water from the river. And at that time, obviously, there was the pain to it that why would they look for somewhere, so bad, to send me to and all of that. But then, I'm it's one of the experiences I'm most grateful for now because it didn't allow me have just one-sided, experience of what it means to be African. But I experienced that. I was there, and we were part of, having to deal with locusts, insects landing, and you're like, what was that? That kind of thing. And so many experiences in the village. It was amazing, and that sort of found a foundation in my stop motion films. I can comfortably create village sets because I have been there. I can also put together, the village experience, at least from my own perspective. So being able to connect who I was, my experience, and what my connection, with the traditional environment, which is core African, and not so impacted by probably say European civilization and all of that, because sometimes you really have to be able to make clear, not as though European civilization does not influence our culture, it does, but then when we want to go nitty gritty into our own unique culture, which is what exactly is unique around the world, because I have shared my stories, I've screened at festivals, I've screened in studios, in really huge studios, stop motion studios. When I go visit and I spend a week or I spend 2 months in a studio, at the end they say, oh yes, so can you screen some of your films? So sometimes I screen 3 films, I screen 4 films, for them. And so it's always an amazing experience for them to see us, the us that is different from them, not the us that is trying to copy them, or the us that is trying to, step up, and show how good we can speak the English and all of that. No, but the us that is just us, maybe not so adulterated us. So sometimes we go like language, we use our own local languages, and all of that. And so this is the uniqueness that travels. This is uniqueness, in my opinion, that goes far. This is unique. I remember that there was a time that I was screening one of our films, okay, well, multiple, but maybe just one of them I would talk about, that when I screened, in okay, I had an experience in Switzerland, but I would probably want to talk about the one in Brazil. When I screened, now the thing is, I didn't realize that the Brazilian culture sort of has a crisscross, with the Yoruba culture. I didn't know that. Of course, how much did I know about Brazil before this point? And then, it was the connection, it was things I didn't even know about the Yoruba culture. They knew, and it was like calling, some of the deities and all of that, and so it was the connection and the fact that, we had the characters speaking Yoruba, and all of that. And so it formed this deep connection with the audience. Now, the truth is this, I have screened my films multiple times in Nigeria, but I have never gotten the kind of reception I got in Brazil. where it was almost like when the film finished screening, it was almost like it carried me out, that kind of thing. And so when I look at that, I see how much, these are stories that we from our part of the world, we don't necessarily value because it's just the things that are happening around. But because this is our unique standpoint, this is the part of us that doesn't exist around the world. This is what truly makes us stand out. That it's what my experience has been. It's been us being able to it, to interpret our own uniqueness, and find ways of expressing it. And for me, stop motion has been fantastic at that, but we're trying to also ensure that we can even do it better. Right now we're launching uh, our stop motion amateurs, which is like first in Africa. It has never been done in Africa. These things are usually very advanced, So when I've been like for the past 2 years, I've been like, we need to improve, we need to improve. So when I had the opportunity to be in a department where they were making amateurs, I was like, I need to bring this to Lagos. I cannot be saying, wow, oh, so this is how it's made. But then I tried as much as possible to, okay, now this is all the funds I'm making. I bought equipment, bought materials I know I'll never be able to find in Nigeria, to make sure that somehow we are able to make this stuff here. And so this is months later, and right now we're able to create those amateurs, replicate and make even, have our own design, of amateurs where Africans, people, from our part of the world can have access to this stuff and do high quality animated content, stop motion animated content. A lot of people in stop motion would probably struggle, with puppet making and all of that. But with these amateurs, high quality amateurs made from stainless steel and brass, the quality, they can start from a very high point already, and so these are things that we're trying to see how we are leveraging on. We can see how others can leverage on it. And so we can tell these stories, because once we're able to do that properly, it will go far.
Thank you very much, and that's a really interesting view as well. So, what I'd like to hear from Mr. Freddie as well on your opinion on the current state of African storytelling. How would you describe the current state of African storytelling, and do you think we're still on the working towards like the journey of full recognition?
I really think we're in a very interesting time. One, I would not necessarily, there is a lot of creators and storytellers I'm seeing across the continent. But one of the things that is different now is because we live in a time where the tools to create have been highly democratized. It's not like you just have to go and pitch to Netflix or adjust your story. So if it doesn't work, nobody's going to back you. Because the tools of how we create is changing, it's really going to help a lot of creators to expand their creative process. Also, I really think that there's a growing sense of cultural consciousness. I really feel there's a generation who are really big on reclaiming African cosmology,
Mm,
African spirituality, African language, African myth, to connect to our creative source and power. And one of the most encouraging part of this evolution is to even look into music. Afrobeats today is global. And I used to tell people that when I was younger, I used to rap like Tupac and B.I.G. But again, the only way you could globalize then was to westernize. But all that is changing now. You find that a lot of the Western artists want to even Africanize so they can keep their relevance in a global market. It's such a beautiful time to be alive. And I think one of the most important aspects of this diffusion of African music and creativity and eventually movies, I will call it the diaspora bridge. So global Africans are reconnecting, building. So for instance, a lot of the content creators in Africa today, they are feeding off the traffic from the diaspora crowd. I mean, that's even where you have the numbers. So in a sense, Africa is not just catching up, it is catching fire. It is setting the world ablaze with its own creativity. So I really think we need to spend some time to define this African creative renaissance, because it's not just a straight copy from Europe, but it's really about a group of people reclaiming our original creative essence. It is a rediscovery of our human spirits, our spirituality, what makes us unique. It's almost like a remembrance of who we've always been as storytellers, the rhythm makers, the dream weavers, spiritual technologists. So there is just so much. Um, I also think we're also seeing global visibility. If you look at the West, they've done a lot from the Norse mythology to the Greek mythology to the Scandinavian culture. But Africans haven't really unpacked our heroes, our mythology for the world. So what we are finding from the West sometimes is almost like repackaging old ideas. They will tell you it's end game, it's first game, but it's still the same story being repackaged over and over again. So we're seeing there is a growing appetite for African content since from the days of Wakanda. I think it was last year Disney released Diwaju, which was an animated series, right? Inspired by the Yoruba culture. This year again, HBO released the Yanu, yet another African creator, Roye. And so we're seeing that there is a demand and a need for it. So that global visibility is important. African animation, film, fashion, and music, largely they're shaping the world. So I really think that's what I see. And I'm very excited and grateful to be here at this time. Mm.
And also, what is your own opinion as well on how we can also appeal to global audiences, and also how we our global audiences can see our work and also understand our culture and our stories as well. So, what's your opinion on that?
I think three things. First of all, we have to truth ourselves, and we all have to do research. It's not because we're Africans we just jump into a story. We have to sit with the story. We have to study who we are, where we're coming from, the journey. We have to really be big on excellence. I really don't agree that Africans should not we should engage. We should put out our best foot forward. One of the things I try to achieve with Magic Carpet Studios, I actually love it when I go abroad and they see our work and they say that can't possibly be from Nigeria. I said it is. They said it's not true, and I have to keep telling them that. Well, you might come around and see it yourself. So it's important for me, and I'm excited because there's a new respect that they are called Africans. Africa is not a backwater continent; it's a royal place. And if we bring that level of excellence to what we create, the world will respect us. If we put excellence in story, not just in the quality of the art, excellence even in execution, we have to be all round. You don't make a great animation and you do a terrible audio. You don't have a great audio and a wacky animation. I think if for you a soup to make sense, all the ingredients have to be well mixed in right proportion. That is what an excellent mind is. And I think we have to really pay tribute and honor our history, the potential of the African story. For it to come to full potential, we need to come to it with excellence.
Thank you very much, and I also agree to those points as well because I've also not uh really seen much of African stories myself, and I feel like
Mm.
Africa has good stories, good cultures, beautiful cultures that deserve to be seen. But how we tell it is also, I feel like, it's an important factor as well in how we tell our stories and not just what we're putting out there for people to see. So thank you for your insights into those. So we'll go to the next stage, which is talking about building a sustainable creative ecosystem. So I'll start from Madam Esther again. And I would like to ask, what does it take to build a sustainable creative business or career in Africa's evolving creative industry?
Um, okay, so you said what does it mean to build a
What,
sustainable career?
what does it take to build a sustainable creative business or career in Africa's evolving creative industry?
Okay, so you say creative on the general, or say not animation, just
Yeah,
generally, I should
it can be
say.
animation, can be general creative career.
Okay, all right. I think that it's important to be able to count the cost, because generally creativity is it's for our parents, to for when we choose careers, because they usually at the first line of when we are choosing careers. It's always something we do alongside with our parents, at least in many cases. And for most parents, before now, they tended to creativity always seemed like a more mediocre choice, something more creative. They probably would have felt that it would be, more prestigious to be a doctor or to be a lawyer or maybe an accountant or something. But some of these careers are things that even some parents still this day still feel that their children should be. And so so when you're choosing a career in creativity, it's important to recognize, the fact that in the beginning it may not look good, so that's, first of all, the cost. It's just like, when you start a festival or something, the first year would not will not be as awesome as subsequent ones, so creativity is always like that. In the beginning it's always like, um when I speak from experience, I recognize the fact that, for a couple of years, it didn't even make sense that I was doing stop motion animation. It did not make sense, it did not make sense to people around me, people who come into the studio and they're like, sorry, what are you doing? You understand? Why did you find something meaningful to do? Something that sort of made sense, and I understood, what their perspectives were, but then I truly connected. I don't think at that time I was bothered about how successful it was going to be. I was just excited that I had the opportunity to do something I truly loved. And every time I had more opportunity and became more confident about it and put it out there, I always found something that encouraged it. So yes, which brings me to the second point, that it's for you to truly succeed, you know, you really have to be courageous about it. Good creativity requires courage. You really have to be careful about inhibitions. In other words, like, when you feel, okay, what are people going to think about it? Sometimes you really have to be careful about them and not allow them sort of stand in the way of your creativity. So sometimes that your creative strength, it's in the abnormality of your kind of creativity. Yeah, I don't even know that if that makes sense, but then it's in how different, because sometimes, well, I can speak maybe from the Nigerian perspective, sometimes different is weird in Nigeria, and so it's when something is different, there's a tendency for the society to stifle, whatever is like, oh no, what's he doing? Does not make any sense, and all of that. So that courage is something that, I think it's required to be intense. It's also important to be able to establish some level of support, you know, um, how exactly you need to have some level of business, because one of the things I've come to understand the last couple of years is that it's the business that sustains the arts. So if you're creative and you do not have a business model or some way that your business will be sustained, it would be like sort of like plane that's about to land. It just, after a while, there will be nothing to sustain it. So it's important that there has to be a business model. There has to be, okay, how am I going to fund this process? Especially if you're about quality, if you're about, being able to put your best foot forward, then that, like for me, I could use myself as an example. One of my first, when the moment I made up my mind that I was going to do stop motion 100%, it became clear to me that I was not going to be earning funds like I did from documentaries. And, I didn't know how long it would take. And so I quickly came up with a business model for grants. And so throughout that period, I registered the company. I did all the documentation that's usually required for grants, uh, the accounts, your domiciliary, all that stuff, paperwork, then, pitch decks for your different projects, make sure that they're like up and running. And the interesting thing was that the moment I got them prepared, then there were lots of open calls from the DFM, from Annecy, MIFA. There were open calls from Benale. There was open calls from, Access Bank. Access Bank had Fresh Africa. There were lots of organizations that had open calls. And so I just sent my documents, to them, my projects that we're working on, to all of these. And amazingly, we got grants from virtually all of them. Grants that supported our work, grants that helped us to be able to buy equipment, tools, sustain some extent, to the point that, we're in, so to an extent, it's that part, it's something that you can't ignore. Most creatives do not have the natural dexterity for business, but it's something that we need to learn. It's something that sometimes we probably need to read up on. I'll learn, many times, to be honest, my husband plays a major role in trying to ensure that I sort of have the business, I'm thinking about it business wise, not just thinking about it. Oh, yes, once we can do this, story will look nice. You were like, okay, yeah, but how exactly are you going to make money from this? And I'm like, okay, I haven't thought about that, that kind of thing and all. So yes, it's very important. I think that it, like Ogafedi said, it's for us, I think it's also important that you establish your standard as a filmmaker or as a creative. You need to be able to establish standard, because you cannot, if it's anywhere, any, there's this phrase that is used in Pidgin, that they say that anywhere belle face, you understand, is what works. No, it cannot be that. You have to define, as a creative, you have to define what you want and go for it. Many times you face challenges. I remember when we were trying to work on the amateurs, many times that we could have cut, sort of in the process of trying to cut costs, take lower quality. We recognize that the markets in Nigeria are very limited. The system in Nigeria is rigged for us to consume, not make. It's for us, it's easier to buy things than make anything. The moment you say, I want to make this, it's like, that's when you realize how bad it is, that raw materials don't exist, close by. You really have to start finding contacts, people that, are probably doing extraordinary stuff in trying to bring raw materials into the country. If there's nothing anywhere, so it's some of these things. So for you to be creative, that, and especially when you want to be cutting edge creative, that means that you want to break grounds, you want to break glass ceilings and all of that stuff, then you need to be able to set that standard and stick with it. It obviously it will be slow at first, because anything high quality, I know that Ogafedi has been doing passport of Malaminia for a lot of years, but we are all expecting, because we know, that the quality that it comes out with is amazing, is another level. But the truth is that it has also taken time, it has also taken tenacity, it has taken resilience, to be able to get it to this point, and so that is essentially how creatives should think, and not necessarily look at it and say, okay, yeah, I'm not making the money, it has to be whatever it is, let's just do it fast, which is essentially what the AI revolution sometimes, so people have to be very careful with it. AI is awesome. AI has been an amazing, sometimes I almost think that to say that AI is almost like a partner. You understand? Especially when you're doing research, you're trying to find out, what options exist and all of that. There's so many things you can quickly figure out, but then in trying to make sure that your creative originality comes out, it's you at that point in time, you have to know where AI crosses the line. It just has to, for your creative originality to find full expression, it's important that it's you, and you have to define that. And ensure that, so that creative originality can come through and not be limited because you're trying to frame it, or you're trying to get a lot of help, or you're trying to make things faster, by AI assistance. So you need to know, okay, yes, this is what AI does for me. This is what AI helps me do. But then when it comes to, for example, people usually say that stop motion is AI proof. Yes, to a very large extent, it is, and that makes it very exciting for me. I do most of the things with my hands, and all of that. But then, I'm planning this, I'm trying to put this in, I get into a mix-up, I'm like trying to figure out what exactly, would help me clean this stuff, and then I just like go to ChatGPT or Gemini and say, I'm like, okay, I have this issue, right now, I'm doing a stop motion and whatever, how do I figure it out? What do I use to clean it? And it's like, okay, yes, you can use acetone, you can use alcohol, you can use this, you can use that, AI will give you all of that. And yeah, and I clean. That part that I'm cleaning, I'm sorting out, it's not my creative output. I get assisted, by the, AI tool, but then what I eventually get done is creative originality. So that I think that those are the few things I'd probably like to say, about creatives. Creatives should draw the line. It's important, or else, the AI thing, in as much as it's very exciting and all that, it would bring commonality to your work. And as a creative, I don't think you want that.
And thank you very much. And like what you said at first is true as well. Like I've mentioned to people who are close to me and also here briefly as well, and how I ch also chose my career path as an animator. Like even my own parents wanted me to be a doctor at first. Like most African parents want to like African parents always want their kids to be doctors, lawyers, engineers. Like even my older brother studied engineering. I have a younger sister who just graduated from law school, from law degree, and she's currently in law school. And I have
Mhm.
also other siblings going to the medical field. So like I'm the only one in the family that's went to the creative side. So and even if it was even a struggle, I switched from medical side to creative side. So it's a common thing among African parents to want their kids to kind of like go towards a career that's more certain than a career that we wouldn't know how you would kind of like sustain it. So because obviously the big issue was how you get income from that, right, especially from the creative side. So it makes people like myself kind of think early in life how to sustain a career like animation. And also you're a lot of other Africans trying to figure out how to kind of like to turn their passions into kind of like profitable ventures as well, which is why we create and organize programs like this where we can get ideas and also lessons on how we can and advices on how we can also build a sustainable career in our creative ventures. So it's really eye-opening from what you said as well, and thank you for those information. So we'll go to Mr. Freddie now on what your opinion. What does it take to build a sustainable creative business or career in Africa's evolving creative industry?
Okay, I think one of the things I'd always try to say is you have to understand the industry as a creative. Very often, creators or creatives will get excited about the art of the business, but not so much about the business of the art. So you have to not just lie to yourself or believe that I'm not a numbers person. Even while you may not necessarily um, handle it all, if a consultant is presenting the facts to you, you should be able to understand it. So it's important for us to not just excuse away the need to be thorough about the business. Investors will come. There is a language of money. Money wants to return to his owner. So you won't say, oh, have a great story. Beyond the great story, what is the return on investment? So I really think every creative or every artist who is in this space needs to get to understand the business proper and at least be able to speak to it on a large one. Secondly, I try to tell creators that it's important for you to understand that you have to build for a decade, not for a day. Don't just have a short-term mindset towards all you do. For Magic Carpet, like Esther just mentioned, we've been on a project for about 5 years. In fact, quite frankly, I trained some guys in that studio for 4 years, and we're not making money; they were just growing. I've had people grow, stay and learn for over 5 years and just keep learning. And so today, when we put out work and people are like, you guys are amazing, I don't know if they really understand the sweat, tears, and blood that goes behind getting better at the work. Animation, it's the better you get, the the easier you can be placed on jobs, the easier you can also work on international jobs. So creators should really, really, really be very intentional about the quality of their work, build a portfolio. I would also say it's important to collaborate. Collaboration is also what I call the new capital. And sometimes you're looking to raise money to do a shot, but if you can talk to one or two people who can come alongside you in making that happen, you probably might not necessarily need to raise that money. So I really think we need to also start to teach our people around the need for us to really, really, truly learn to collaborate on that one. I also would also suggest that you have to understand the with respect to business, there are many things, right? Whether it's co-production or you want to, like Esther said, structure for grants. There are grants that you can apply for, but you have to understand your business model. For us as Magic Carpets, we have a hybrid. We do a lot of outsourcing jobs for Cartoon Network or US clients, but we also produce our own films. So if we are doing a production only studio, I think we'll probably not be still around at this time. If we're doing an outsourcing only studio, I think we probably also have lost a couple of people who wanted to really create something that was close to their hearts. But in being both, we've been able to survive. So you also have to find a business model that's not just driven by scarcity or hustle, but is driven by that abundance, that sense of fulfillment, flourishing, and ability to create and contribute.
And also what lessons can we also like other African studios or individual African creatives, what can we kind of learn from how you've built Magic Carpet Studios into like a continental brand?
I think one of the best gifts I have in Magic Carpet are my co-founders. I really think we have very great chemistry. I'm not a sole entrepreneur, but I have a very solid team of people. We complement each other. One of my co-founder is very good with quality QA/QC. He keeps an eye on everything that comes out of the studio. My other co-founder is operational. He's just very quick in production management, structuring production. I'm always the go-getter, meeting people, convincing clients that we can do their work, pitching our ideas to investors. That's me. So I really think if you're a creator, you probably would need to not just go alone. It will be important for you to figure out how you can find an ecosystem you can plug in, how you can find other creators you can co-create with. It really does help. The second thing again is try as much as possible to build up your creative vitae. Your curriculum vitae is not the most important thing when you're a creator. People want to know what you've done, what you've built, what you're building. So every mistake is a recipe, it's not a shame. You have to be able to turn every mistake into a brief, a design brief, and learn from it and grow with it. I also think it's important for every creator to be able to make themselves valuable. See yourself as valuable. Don't let the economy or the environment devalue your art. You might not find people who will appreciate what you do. You might not find a community of people who understand and support you. But fundamentally, what is important is you knowing that you are you're worthy of success, and you are unique, and you are a gift, and you are enough. And I would also advise finally, don't create for meaning, create from a place of meaning. Don't create for validation. Create from a place of self-validation. When our creative works or what we design or create, it's about the applause and how we feel by how we are fulfilled in them. It can be very, very challenging. The reality of it is don't let your mental health be very vulnerable or dependent on things you cannot control. Let your applause be one you can find inside yourself that you can whisper to yourself and say, hey, I'm growing, I'm becoming more, right? Protect yourself from the pressure, the scarcity mindsets around. Let your mind be deeply embedded in the fact that you're great and you're growing and you're fulfilling what you're doing. I think that's really something I would want to keep with them.
Thank you very much for the lessons there. So, before we go to receive questions for the audience, I want to ask you guys like final questions on collaboration and the next generation. Before we go to question for the questions from the audience, I would like to ask both of you, how can African creatives collaborate across disciplines like film, animation, tech, and storytelling to shape the continent's creative future? Start from you, Madam
Esther.
Esther.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think one of the things that's very important, and I think Ogafedi has established it, is very clear. You can't learn it enough. You cannot do it alone. It's not possible. At least not do it well or do it effectively. It's important that I think it's understanding, the role of what other people bring in. We're all made very uniquely, in different ways. So sometimes there are gaps, we find gaps, and it's not always it's not the solution is not always trying to ensure that we can fill that gap. Sometimes it's someone else that should fill that gap. because somehow we're just not made to fill all the gaps. And so it's collaboration is collaboration is not, I think that collaboration is not something that's optional. I think it's important that we note that, because it's so, yeah, there's a natural fear. There are fears that we experience, and to be honest, those fears are real. Um, because of the fact that sometimes you really don't know what people's intentions are, people's true intentions are. And so sometimes it may bring some concern, like, oh, okay, if I collaborate, just today I had a conversation with someone and I was like, let's collaborate on it. And I was like, yeah, cool, and then, I was trying to explain a couple of things and I was, there was this point I was like concerned that, like, okay, um, you know, I was trying to explain that I hope you know that the project is kind of important and stuff like that and all of that, because I wasn't sure, if we're like on the same page, where I'm thinking like, okay, we want to be able to make impact with this. And the person is like, well, let's make money, that kind of thing. This is real, I'm like, okay, wait, you understand, hold on, so sometimes, so I brought that example up, to establish the fact that it's in collaboration. It's also important that you're able to think about, some of those things, that you're on the same page. But it shouldn't be seen as an option. It should be seen as, something that you should continue to seek after, ways that you can connect with other people. Sometimes it's some other people that will bring in the funds. Like for me, I've also had that kind of support, where I get, collaborative support, sometimes even from family, like, oh yeah, this stuff you're doing makes sense, let's work together, let's invest, stuff like that. So it come from, come from friends, come from colleagues, old classmates, stuff like that. I've had all that kind of experience, in the course of trying to work or get things done. So collaboration could also involve, people having a particular tendency more than you, like that. I have somebody here on the session, and her name is Joy. She's pretty good with the market. Some of the raw materials we use for working, I'm not very familiar with the markets. I know what exactly I want, but then she's pretty good. So she goes, we get to relay and over the onion, because it's, do you know how exciting it is that, you're making a global product, but you're using local materials for it, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's proudly made in Nigeria, and all of that. But then it takes some level of collaboration for us to be able to do that. You can't be here, there, everywhere. So collaboration also has, all sorts of different types of collaboration, that one could approach, but I think the fundamental thought is that we can't do it alone. We need to work together. We need to grow together, in the process, because we obviously don't start by knowing it all. And so also that shouldn't stand in the way, the fact that you haven't completely figured it out, what you want to do, or what your eventual goals are, or what your eventual film, animation, or project will look like. Sometimes you really have to just hop on it, and then you figure it out as you go. Right now, there are lots of tools, lots of support. When you don't always have to wait for open calls to come. Sometimes you can just go to Google and check for opportunities that exist for what you're doing. You'll be amazed at the various links that will come up. I remember that when I went to Poland, was it 2 or 3 years ago, for stop motion festival, where I saw it was wonderful, just me typing in Google stop motion opportunities, around the world. And then I saw this link, I'm like, oh, okay, this program is coming up, that kind of thing. And I applied, I saw some of the stop motion greats there, and I was like, yeah, this would be nice to be part of this experience, and honestly, I was selected. And obviously I had to go through a process though. It wasn't like, I don't think they had Africans in mind for the application. So I had to add an attachment to explain why I need to be selected, even though I'm African. and why it's important that they have to consider diversity in stop motion. Yes, stop motion is that medium where when you go around the world, you see that it's predominantly white. So I've been in lots of spaces. Many times when I go to stop motion festivals, I've gone a couple of times, I'm the only black. So it always looks like maybe I went to the wrong place, I'm probably at the wrong place, that kind of thing. But then, it's these opportunities come from you being able to check out for them, and all of that. So yes, and collaboration helps with things like that because there are folks that, are more informed about these things, for us to be able to access opportunities because some of this, especially in the beginning, some of these prompting opportunities, like, you have a project, and you don't know how to go about it and all of that, you would get a workshop or a lab that will teach you how to, the process of producing it or the process of directing it, and for me, I feel that these are also collaborations, in some way. For example, I do not just consider that I'm collaborating with artists. I also consider that I'm collaborating with the French embassy. I'm collaborating with the US embassy. I'm collaborating with, different organizations, that support us without what the support that they have also brought, it would have probably been difficult for us to, go the path that we have gone through. Like for us to have gotten a significant international audience, international network, it has also been the support of some of these embassies, that has made that possible. So yes, so collaboration, is like being able to look at all of the stakeholders that exist, around you. There are different people that are stakeholders. Sometimes your collaborator could even be somebody that's not necessarily on your side, with you. Sometimes those are the people that really push you, like, somebody who doesn't believe that what you're doing will work. I see them as collaborators. It's interesting, but it is, you understand? Because, not because you're doing it to prove a point, but then the idea is that, oh, okay, yeah, somehow, this has to work. It just has to work, that kind of thing. So, yes, all of these stakeholders, all of these people sort of play a role, in what we do. Sometimes in the work we do, we always have to have some certain level of mentorship. Mentorship is also some sort of collaboration. Somebody that helps you, somebody that helps you mentally, emotionally, spiritually as well. Just getting you in the right frame of mind, in the right place, to be as creative as you can be. Because sometimes for example, I told someone recently, I said that it took me years of it took me years of going for pitching and winning pitching competitions and experiencing some level of some level of success as a filmmaker to recognize the fact that my ideas are valid. I don't know if you get that my ideas are good, they're valid, they're excellent. It's taking, but sometimes you don't have to wait to that point, that if your work or you've won awards before you know that you're a good filmmaker. I think it's important that you believe that from the very beginning and that your ideas, they're worth pushing out, and not feel that maybe the idea is not good enough, maybe I should keep trying. And then you are still on that idea for like 5 years, 6 years, and the world is moving, and then your idea is still in your mind. So sometimes you need to feel that way and put it out there. So it's ensuring that you have the right collaborators, people that are saying the right things to you, not people that are telling you that you can't, it's not worth it. I think it's also important that you're able to filter, what kind of collaboration or collaborative experience that you're having. So I'm just trying to be very dynamic with the word collaboration. It's essentially a lot of things, but then one thing stands, it's not something we can do alone. Being creative and being able to bring it to that for us to have that optimal experience, with our creative juices, if I should use that word. It's important that we're able to share that experience with people. We're also able to share people's experiences. I think one of the things that I've learned, over the last couple of years is not just, sometimes as creatives, we see our creative work, we don't see other people's own. It's also very important, to be excited, about other people's creative experiences, to be able to come out of ourselves and say, oh, okay, I'd like to work with you on your project. that kind of thing. I'd like to make a project work. These are some of the things that helps us as well to become, even more, not just tell stories, or try to get our stories out, but become more impactful in that experience. So yeah, I think these are some of my thoughts, about collaboration, and so that it's not, it also becomes part of that exciting experience. Obviously, there are parts that one should be careful, so that at the end of the day, you don't work with someone that has something else in mind, and then you sort of have, because at the end of the day, I've heard some stories, and sometimes it's you when the collaborative experience goes bad, sometimes it's as bad as it would have been better if you didn't do that project, at all, because it can really mess you up, and then disturb the production of another project, because you're still trying to deal with the mental toll of a previous project that went bad. So yeah, those are probably my thoughts.
Thank you so much for that. And so, Mr. Fred, will come to you as well. So, what's your opinion on how African creators can collaborate across different disciplines to shape the continent's creative future?
I think the first thing first is to find alignment. There has to be some kind of vision alignment. There has to be some kind of values alignment. But also, it's important to have on the table the discussion around what is the legal understanding of the structure of partnership.
Hmm.
What are the contexts? Is there a shared IP? What's the nature of collaboration? I think don't ignore the paperwork. It's always important because over time, as the project evolves, expectations will start to shift and change. Some people will feel they're giving way more and getting less. Some people feel they're giving that they some people feel they have less and they want more. So you want to be able to have the legal to navigate that. Esther mentioned the need for you to have like mentorship, and I think it's important before you go into those things, consult from older colleagues, people who have been in that space. But I would always tell every creator, there's something they used to tell us in business school. I want to be a successful owner of be a successful owner of a 5% of a thriving business than be 100% owner of a company that is not doing anything or is not going anywhere. If you are owning an IP or you have all the great ideas but you're not doing anything with them, it's of no good use to you. What you need to do is to sort of like get going. I also want creators to understand that don't always be too attached in a sense to just one idea. There's abundance. There's a lot more ideas that will come. Some people sat on an IP too long. Some people sat on an idea just too long. There is always the promiscuous nature of an idea. It will flex with any mind that is available to it. So you want to be able to build gradually. Sometimes your first set of jobs might not be the most financially rewarding, but it might be the most strategic portfolio building opportunity. So don't use one metric to gauge how you move into partnership. See your opportunity, measure growth, measure your visibility. Try and also see your network, how you're growing. I would also say that be very open to collaboration and networking. Meet people, be genuinely interested in knowing people. And Victoria, one of the reasons why I said yes to this was because, too, just a young lady trying to build something and putting something like this together deserves our support because that's how the world gets ahead. And it's not something that I have to check and say, okay, am I available? How do I make myself available to support it? Because somebody somewhere will listen to this podcast and might get an insight into how they navigate a season in their life and become more successful. And I think we owe it to the people coming behind us to share the lessons so they don't have to wait too long like we did. They don't have to make the mistakes that are avoidable like we made. And I think that's one of the beauty of opportunities of sharing like this.
Thank you very much for that as well. And we also discussed this a little bit on the first session of this festival as well on collaboration and the importance of collaborating with other people to also progress in careers such as the different creative careers in the industry. And also with I'm also working on a project right now, animation project. And even though at first when I wanted to start this story as well, I didn't have the tools I needed for it as well, especially with a functioning computer. But I still wrote a story and also reach out to people who were interested in collaborating with it, even though it's like a voluntary project. And even though it's a voluntary project as well, I also sorry as a project to also make like agreement contracts and stuff like that to make sure everyone is understanding the terms and conditions of of particular projects that we're working on. And if there's any like financial aspect that come up for that particular project, everyone benefits from that sort of things. So like also from university, I've also seen them. We also then learned about the importance of collaboration as well, because even in university through our projects, we had to collaborate at some point. And collaboration is like one of the key points to also pass whatever assignment we had to do. So I've always been built on collaboration stuff. So I also saw that as an important factor in the creative industry to collaborate with different people, kind of move forward, because obviously we can't move forward alone. There's not every work that we can do alone, especially because we don't have every skill. We may lack in one area where we need other people to also fill in. So I also appreciate your opinions on that as well. So before we move on and also ask our final question before we wrap up this session, I would like to ask if anyone in the audience also has a question for our panelists. We don't have a lot of time, so we'll probably just take like one question or two from anyone who may have a question for any one of them or both of them. You can either put your question in the chat or just like raise your hand if you have a question for any of the panelists. Okay, I'll take it as no one has a question. But like if at any point a question comes up, I would maybe allow it in the little time we have left. So that's to wrap up the session and that's to kind of like discuss on closing reflections. So I was ask a final question to you both. Um, like what is the one message that you want every young African creative to leave with tonight? What is your like advice or message to upcoming like African creatives who are like coming up in the creative industry? What message you want to pass across to them, including the audience that are here at the moment? So we can start from Mrs. Esther, please.
All right. Well, one thing um I do or one thing I would say is I'm always excited, about what I do. I'm excited about stop motion animation. I'm excited about possibilities. It's for me, it's a living excitement. I feel like I feel very privileged to do stuff that I truly enjoy doing, and I would say that for everyone, I believe that we all have some sort of superpower, and our superpower is usually embedded in the things that we're excited about. It's embedded in the things that, you know, God has given us capacity to do. And so I would say, and I think it would be the areas that I would emphasize on is that don't hold back. Yes, it takes quite a bit, to get things done, wherever part of the world that you're in. It's difficult. It may be challenging. It may even be more challenging probably on the African continent or in Nigeria. But one thing stands is this, is that you know somehow we all have the capacity, to, if we push and we do that, and we stay consistent. Not it's we have the idea. It's I know that creatives sometimes could have ideas and ideas and ideas. And interestingly, I'm one of those kind of creatives that have all sorts of ideas. But then, many times you really have to be very careful with it. Understanding that you cannot move from one thing to the other and expect that it will do well like that. I think I've reiterated it in the beginning. I would say that you have an idea, don't hold back, focus, be consistent, always show up. It's very interesting part one to say. You understand? Always show up, even in the days that you don't feel like it. It must never be because of how you feel. So sometimes you have situation, it just can't be. You understand? You always need to always find a way to show up, and ensure that as much as possible the standards that you've set, you stick to it. It's not about the noise, it's about what you're focused and what you essentially want to do. And I think that I would also like to say that there's no lateness to it. You understand? So it doesn't matter if you're 17 or you're 47 or 50 or that kind of thing. I think it's very important that what these principles they're not respecters of ages. It's just important that we're able to stay focused, tell the story, be authentic, be original. These things help. There are things that over time, whenever everything seems to be like upside down, you're able to say, oh, what these are the things that are anchors, that keep you anchored, and you can always go back and say, yes, why I'm doing this, because sometimes I'm like, okay, yeah, we've been working on the film, we're supposed to submit the film in the festivals this year. Yes, that's the noise. But then I realize that, yes, but we're trying to create a new standard, we're trying to, and that takes time, so if creating a film has to be not creating a film has to be the sacrifice we make so that we can raise the standard and raise the bar, and that by the time we show up next, we're showing up with something at another level, then that has to be, and so when such decisions are made, you have to stick with it, you have to focus on it, and then you have to get it done. So for me, I would say that, yes, stay focused, stay resilient, let it out, don't let it stay in. Creativity is not meant to be kept. It's meant to be given. And so as much as possible, that should be something that, any creative here should always, if they don't already have that, should always have in mind, because that essentially will make the difference. The world is waiting for us. The world, they've already seen tidbits of what Africa can do. But the truth is that they haven't seen anything yet. They have not. The truth is that we are gathering momentum. We are gathering energy. You understand? And so you need to be part of that, because when it gets explosive, it would explode. You could see what happened with Afrobeat. You could see what happened with Nollywood. You understand? So you can imagine what will happen with animation. It will be something else. So it's definitely an amazing time to be a creative, amazing time to be alive. Like Oga Fedi said.
And in one word, what do you think defines the future of African storytelling for you?
Okay, the future of African story is it will be transforming. I think that's the word. To be transformative. I think it will bring a new, it would probably be a new dawn, in entertainment experience around the world. I think so. For me, I feel that it will be very transformative. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And over to you, Mr. Freddy. What message do you want every young African creatives to leave with tonight?
I would say, don't be stuck. Be part of the evolution, not the part of the road. Be part of the role. And the truth is that things will come and disrupt, whether it's AI tomorrow or it's something else that would come. Don't be a spectator, be a participant. Don't just stand idly by and watch the world pass by. But find a way that you can use that change for your advantage, to position you, to empower you, to help you to win and to lead. So therefore, be an artist at heart, but also be a technologist in the way you think. It's important for you to embrace technology. Technology is agnostic, it's not an enemy. AI is not an enemy. AI is a tool. It uses your intelligence for you. So why don't you equip yourself on how you can prompt it to become your best ally and not your threat, but your biggest opportunity? And that will be my thoughts and my parting thoughts at this time.
And lastly, also, in one word, what do you think defines the future of African storytelling?
I think it will be disruptive, disruptive and awakening. I think that's disruptive in the sense that the world think they've seen Africa, they think they know Africa, but they haven't really met us. At least not in the way that we are built. So I really think that stories will spring like a zeitgeist across the continent, all the way to Zimbabwe, down the way to Kinshasa, from Lagos to Joburg. You're going to find a lot of creators arise. So I really think what the world will experience was is the same awe and wonder they saw when they came into Africa to witness African art and how they felt like it was deeply spiritual, it was deeply transformative. In what I know, a lot of the creators like Esther and the guys in my studio and what we're all doing, it's actually paying tribute to the true spirit of the African essence, honoring our lineage, our ancestry, and bringing that magic that is our beauty to the world. It is really, really what I think would define the next age: disruptive thinking, disruptive imagery, disruptive imagination, and rude awakening.
Thank you very much, and also appreciate you guys for sharing your thoughts and opinions and just being part of this discussion of talking about the future of African storytelling and the creative industry in Africa. So I believe that is a wrap for today. We finished quite early because we didn't have questions from the audience, but those who joined like towards the end, I saw some people join. If you still have a question like to ask any of the panelists, you can share that in the comments, and if not, we'll wrap up. So I wanted to like appreciate you guys once more for being here. Even when I sent you guys a message to invite you for this, I didn't expect you guys to actually accept the invite. Because I've also been following you guys on LinkedIn and the kind of work you guys did and how you're also doing stuff to kind of like build the creative industry in Nigeria particularly because I also have that kind of interest lately as well, kind of like being part of the creative industry in Nigeria because I also try to research different aspects of the creative industry and particularly animation because of that is what I studied. That's more of my passion. So but lately they're kind of like researching into the creative industry in Africa and seeing what I could do to also be a part of that create industry and also seeking ways that can be further developed and further how people also be part of this kind of like venture into building the creative industry in Africa because I believe that a lot of Africans have talent and have a lot of creativity, and I believe that creativity should be shown to a public audience and not kept within the African culture itself. And I believe that animation was a good medium for something like that in promoting African storytelling and the point and showing the important taking the importance of people come into the industry and kind of like help develop that industry and take it to the level that it needs to be. Because especially myself, who didn't grow up in Nigeria, so obviously like I wanted to learn of that culture too because I have a background in Nigeria and Ivory Coast as well. So I kind of like wanted to learn of that culture and one way I could learn from that is what I see from the media as well, because I love of obviously if Westerners learn about Africa from the media and from what they watch. So obviously I thought that the media could be the same medium in which African stories can be told, and especially the good parts of Africa and the good parts of Nigeria, and not just the negative parts that most of us may know about Nigeria. So it was nice having to have you guys in our midst today to share your thoughts about the future of African storytelling and the state of it now and how it used to be and where it's coming from. Obviously, it's different from where how it started, and we can tell that the future of African storytelling and the creative industry in Africa is promising. So I appreciate you guys for your opinions, and I believe that the audience also have learned one or two things from you both. And we also have a community, which I mentioned in our first session on Monday. We have a community on WhatsApp called Kehillah Academy, where African creators around the world, whether you're in animation, film, illustration, different kind of creative fields, who all come together in the community, kind of like net for purpose of networking, and also kind of building a community, that establishing a community of African creators where we can get opportunities available for ourselves, build a network, build our networks, and if we have projects we want to work on, it could be a place where we could collaborate with other people to work on our personal projects. So that's the purpose of the community. And we also promote as well. If anyone wants to join us, they can also send us an email or connect with me personally on LinkedIn. And email is kehillahstudios@gmail.com for anyone who wants to join that. And also contact us for any further information about anything else about what we do at Kehillah Studios. So once more, I want to appreciate both of you, Miss Esther and Mr. Freddie, for being here. I appreciate your presence. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. So I believe that is all for today. And thank you all for guys for joining us as well and listening to this conversation. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's not forget as well, our next
That's
session is on Friday. The topic for that is faith and career. So I advise you all to be there as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Well, thank you.